Oh, dear.
So, friends, I have a human in the chat who has 2 job interviews tomorrow.
Ooh.
Anybody have any advice on how to nail a job interview? James, you've applied for a lot of jobs in the past 15 or so years.
Sure have not.
So give us that wisdom that you've acquired over your long career.
Yeah, the last time I had a job interview, I was September of 2001. That is the last time. That was the last and essentially only job interview I've ever had in my life. I've gone on one job interview, and it was McDonald's. So it was basically, do you want to work here? And I answered correctly, which was, yes, please. And I got the job.
The please.
So maybe it was the please. Honestly, I don't think that was the actual conversation.
Can you stand upright?
Yeah,
Can you have a body?
Yeah, so
perfect. Paul,
I'm not a good person to talk to.
You've obviously applied for a lot of jobs in the past 15 years as well. Could you tell us about your experience?
I've applied for 1 or 2 jobs that I mostly didn't get.
Fantastic.
So I had to go back to making internet videos.
Okay.
There was a couple times that I applied for jobs that if I had gotten hired, could have totally changed the course of the loading ready run history.
Interesting.
I have actual job interview advice because I've done a whole bunch of them over the last year.
Okay.
My best advice is that when somebody asks a question, try and have a specific instance that you're speaking to that gives your answer to this. They're asking, what was a time that you had to deal with a rude customer or something like that, and how did you handle that? Try to be as specific as possible, and always try and keep your answers as focused and as detailed as possible. Take your time. Job interviews, they can sometimes feel like a test where it's like you got to be quick at it, but a lot of times they give you they block off a half hour or an hour for interviews, so don't be afraid to take a couple of minutes to think about your answers. Don't be afraid to go into a lot of extra detail, and try and give as much context as possible for your answers, so the interviewer has as much detail about you as possible to form an opinion on it.
That's a really great point. I've certainly sat in interviews where I felt like the person who I was interviewing was trying to fill time as though it were some sort of broadcast or something where they had to not have dead air, and it's I've always felt worse about that than I have people who are just can I think about that for a minute? And it's kind of awkward because you sit in silence for a bit, but the answers are always way better, and you get a lot better sense of the candidate.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, I feel like you'd always rather somebody who would be willing to take a moment and think things through rather than somebody who's like, "Wah!"
Yep.
And there's also is the idea of, there is the idea of trying to look at it as not necessarily just a one-way thing. Having questions for the interviewer in the sense of, things that you want to know about the company or whatever. Do some research about, so what exactly do you do here is not a good question.
Yes.
Do some research on the company, but stuff about the job with the idea being that you want to show that you're not just trying to get any job, you don't care what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Asking what a typical day is like is a great question.
Yeah.
Both it makes you look excited about the job, and it is one that looks good from the interviewer side.
Yeah. One of the questions that you will almost always get in an interview is, why do you want to work here? And the answer is almost certainly because you need money to live in a capitalist society. But you applied for that job over any of the other jobs that are out there. Why did you apply to work in that store rather than going to work in a mine? So there's a reason why you applied for that. Joe is right. Coal dust is bad for you. But yeah, so think about that, and there are a lot of like the more interviews you do, you'll notice that there are a lot of really common questions. Joe, I think you would look great in overalls.
Super. You'd be a super cutie.
It's you know, the interview process is of course a very rough way. Like the idea here is people are trying to figure out, you know, if you'd be good for the role, if you not only can you do it, but will you be a good person to have at the office
Yes.
or at the company or whatever. And so you're trying to, in the very short, you know, what is a very short amount of time, evaluate each other to see sort of compatibility and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be kind of an awkward process, but you just sort of, unfortunately, there's the information, you know, you don't want to just repeat all the information on your resume because they have that information. You're trying to, what is the aspect of stuff that is like the, you know, the slightly undefinable stuff.
If they, sorry, go ahead.
So, no, I was just going to say, you were saying that they have their information. They have your resume. I was actually in a job interview once where the people who were interviewing me had not read my resume.
Yeah, like, who are you again?
specifically.
Why are you here?
Yeah, exactly.
So they were just kind of winging it?
Well, like they had this was for the provincial government. The provincial government has a very like structured and regulated interview system. They have specific
Right.
competencies that they have to interview for. So, and this was all younger people that they were clearly giving experience doing interviews for. So the people who were interviewing me had not actually seen my resume itself. They were trying to get a sense
okay.
of the competencies that they were interviewing for. And boy, was that not a great interview.
Actually, there is an aspect of, like I said, I haven't done a lot of interviews, but I know there is, in certain types of jobs, especially like governmental jobs and stuff, there is an aspect of, there's like a checklist aspect where it's like, not just that you have to have the, you know, you have to make yourself an attractive candidate, but there's also just like, you have to have like this, and if you don't have those things, they don't even consider you.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to make sure that you've like met the base requirements.
Yeah.
And that you can, and that you can, that they can check those off. But anyway.